I can't see Oregon falling out of the top 10 for recruiting. It's just a matter of whether they get in the top 5.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That is Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you as always by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Oregon recruiting over the weekend kind of felt hotter than the Arizona desert this time of year, and landed some guys that even made me turn my head when I got off the golf course, who we will all talk about. But how is it landing nationally with where Oregon sits right now? They've jumped up to number 6. They were at number 5 at one point in the 24/7 Sports high school composite rankings. But what was your reaction to seeing all these guys commit seemingly at the same time?
That's kind of unusual. Most of the schools want them to be spread out to keep themselves in the news longer. Obviously, Oregon's plan is different. I think it's kind of cool, actually. This is how it used to be. It would come in spurts. Didn't matter the school. But when you get guys like Brew, Sharma, Davison, etc., you'll take them anytime you can get them. They got 4 really good players.
Yeah, and I think that the buzz that got created has been really good. Certainly, Oregon is not done with their 2025 class, because right now they have 14 verbal commits. Caleb Edwards, the tight end I talked about on yesterday's show, he committed to Alabama, and we'll talk about a guy later in the show that might end up playing tight end at Oregon if he does indeed choose the Ducks. But I look at where this class sits, Brian, and I feel really good about the players that they have. I think there's going to be an even larger push and emphasis on the defensive side of the ball as we continue to progress throughout the cycle. But a top 5 recruiting class for the second straight year, which has never been done in Oregon football history, feels very attainable to me.
I think it's very attainable because they only need a couple more guys. They're still in it on Pickett, etc. They have a chance. Of course, part of that is who else the other schools land, Georgia, Clemson, etc. But hey, if you're in this spot right now and think about the D linemen they have, they've got kids out of Ohio, Texas, all kinds of places. Oregon's at a really good spot. You can't be disappointed if you're a Ducks fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's been quite good. And look, they haven't even hit on every single player. I mean, they got Deshaun Brame. They did not get Lincoln Cure. They didn't get Caleb Edwards, but they're still on a guy in Michael Terry who could play tight end. Maybe he's a true just athlete coming out of high school there. But before we get to the films of each of those guys, the class sitting at 6th right now is a great spot to be, and 14 total verbal commits. How many more players would you guess Oregon ends up landing for this 2025 class? Because I would guess 8-ish, 8 give or take 2 would be where my estimation would be.
That really depends on what they think on guys turning pro early, because that impacts what you need to do in the portal, like it or not. There's no excuse not to have an experienced roster for Oregon, have their NIL, but that's a fine line with the high school recruits because they don't want you taking experienced players over them. But you could be right. It just depends on which guys want to come. And here's the other part. A few of the key guys, if they decide on signing day, you have no makeup time. Like if you miss, you could be at 4 and you need 8 because it depends on how many guys decide to make their decision truly on signing day. So it's always a wild card, and then you got the NIL factor. Trying to predict this stuff now in today's era is really, really hard.
Let's get to the film of these 4 commits and your thoughts. I talked about them earlier this week, but you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, and I won't date you on that front. But we'll just say he brings a wily veteran sort of presence to the film room there. We'll begin with with the offensive guys. He's probably I think I'm Brian's favorite Locked On host to record with, bar none. We're going to start with Jordan Davison, the running back. Reminds me of a couple of Oregon running backs from the past. Thomas Tyner and Royce Freeman a little bit. I see a good amount of Tyner just in the way that he kind of chops his feet. Freeman did as well, but really big, bulky, bell cow sort of back.
When I was watching his film and then I looked at what he's currently listed at, because I'd met him last summer, but he's gained a lot of weight. He was 205-ish, somewhere around there. He's listed at 230 now. And I'm like,
that's big.
I don't know if I like that. That's really big. Like, not many guys can carry 230 and make people miss. Eventually, you got to make guys miss no matter how big you are. But, like, he plays at modern day, extremely patient, understands when to make cuts and all that. Like, he's polished for a high school kid. That's not in question. I don't see elite speed, but hardly anybody brings him down on first contact. If you want a guy that is a grinder that always seems to fall forward, Lord have mercy, Davison is that guy. And he's got pretty good speed, too, once he gets to the second level. He's not a put a foot in the ground and hit full speed right away guy. He's not going to beat Dion in his prime in a 40, but he's fast enough, and he's over 200 pounds. There are a lot of kids that their parents were not happy in the stands as their kid was getting smoked. And like, he just ran over him. He's a power football player. And I think that's what Lanning wants, because this is the kind of kid Kirby's had for 10 years at Georgia. Like, this fits their, and he's trying to be Georgia. Let's not kid ourselves. And that's a pretty good plan.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. You should be. If you're not, then
good.
there's something wrong. But no, this is a Georgia kind of running back. He can catch, and no matter what he does, the first guy doesn't bring him down. Yeah, it's a good football player.
Yeah, I think that he's a really interesting pairing with De'Aaron Hill Jr., who is definitely more of a high-end breakaway speed sort of guy. Like, that's a thunder lightning tandem. Whether or not either or both of them see the field in 2025, I think depends on what happens with Oregon's running back room. Jordan James, Noah Whittington will both have a decision to make after this season. James especially, if he's in the lead role and really thrives, I could see him being someone that the NFL is attracted to there. But the other offensive commit Oregon landed, Deshaun Brame out of the state of Kansas, which produced two blue chip tight ends,
which is bizarre.
In the same. I mean, that's as bizarre because it's Kansas, right? It's not like this isn't Texas or even a Washington, Utah, Arizona. I mean, it's Kansas. Like,
they may not have 2 5-star or anything close to that players over the next 5 years combined.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Like, I knew the Lincoln Cure was from there, but then when Brame popped up on the radar and I was diving into him, like, wait, he's from Kansas too? Like, these kids are they're both like, oh, all right. But biggest thing that stands out to me with him, Brian, leaping ability at the tight end position. He has got some bunnies. What stands out to you?
Bunnies. I'm going to have to write that down. That's a new descriptive term for it. Let me get that here. That's good.
Yeah. I try.
Well, I appreciate that. The thing with me, for a guy his size, and I've met him, he played with California Power. This is a kid that, for his length, he's a 6'5", 6'6" kid. He can turn the corner and move. Most kids his size, it's chunky, like how they turn the corner if they don't slow down. It's not very smooth. He was doing it in the snow. And I was like, okay, this film is a little bit unusual for a big guy. And that's why his offers, although being from the incredible state of Kansas, the blue chip maximum that they come out with every year, he's really good. And he got kids or schools from all over after him. I think he can play early at Oregon. I don't know how many guys they're deep after this season, or I don't know their depth chart, but the physical skill is there. Runs away from guys. He can take a screen and make somebody miss. You take this kid every year, no question. He's a kid play at Georgia or anywhere else. Big time football player.
Right now in 2025, he would have a real opportunity to push for the number 2 tight end spot on Oregon's roster. I think that would be, and that's why, I've talked about tight ends a lot here on the show. That's a position that I think Oregon is recruiting with a lot of intention because they know what the roster situation is. And do you find a lot of big tight ends in the portal, like big impact guys? Not really. The one exception, I don't know if you caught this transfer move, but Benjamin Jurasik from Stanford to Georgia, that's a football player. That is a guy that's going to make an impact. That is an impact football player. But for tight ends, that is a difficult thing to find. What about the defensive side of the ball? Still more film breakdowns to get to with Brian. That is coming up next. And coming up right now is Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, which is a lot better for you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60%, which is more than half last time I checked. I don't know if they changed math, but probably not. Buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., whatever you are looking for. You get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's talk defensive players and their films, Brian, because that's where I think the class is going to continue to grow the most. Like offensively, with 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a quarterback, and a couple offensive linemen, it's a not completely full offensive recruiting class for Oregon, but it is certainly more full than it is on the defensive side of the ball. We'll have some defensive updates coming later in this segment as well. But let's start with Josiah Sharma. This is a guy who looked like he was going to Texas. I had a buddy who's a Texas fan feeling very confident that they were going to land Josiah Sharma. And then Oregon, Tosh Lupo and Dan Lanning just came and snatched him out. Tony Tuioti all did a great job there as always. When I look at Sharma, I see really quick hands and a guy who, could maybe slim down a bit or could bulk up and be Jordan Scott. Definitely someone that plays on the interior, though. What stands out to you about his film?
Just how wide he is. I was thinking this could be a 325 guy that plays some zero tech. There's a lot of ways he could do it, but he's pretty agile for his size. I don't know what you thought, but I'm like, okay, he's got a swim move. He tries to play one gap and get up the field. I was a little surprised when I saw him like in his stance. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a power guy, take on a couple blockers, mug it up a little bit. No, he was up the field. I was impressed, and I didn't know that he could be that consistent with it because a few of the plays, they ran screens, which is smart against D linemen like him. You're not going to beat him up, obviously, but he would turn immediately and go find the football. He hustles. Most kids 300 pounds are not real friendly with the screen game. They don't like it much because they don't want to run that far. He didn't care. So that much size, that much athleticism, and that much want to, it's kind of hard not to like this kid. He's a national recruit.
Yeah, 6'5", 295 pounds is what he's listed at right now. I think when you have that much height, you could make an argument, well, slim down by 30 pounds, and suddenly you're a Brandon Dorless hybrid type where you play defensive end and you play defensive tackle. I agree with what you said. I think his body type, he is incredibly wide. He just feels like someone that takes up a lot of space. I'm interested to see how, the strength and power he does have translates to the college level. Because like you said, a lot of his highlights are him having really, really quick hands, which is awesome because when you find that from interior defensive linemen, that makes them very disruptive. But I was kind of curious that typically a guy of that size, you would think his number one attribute would be power, and he also shows the hands, but like he looks very quick off the ball to me. And then, he's not the most agile, but he's not slow when he's, guarding in the screen game and whatnot. But I think that's a guy who you could actually put on 15 to 20 pounds and have him be just a true run-stuffing defensive tackle.
How many guys do you know that are big body guys that are already 290 will want to slim down?
290 want to slim down? I don't know any personally.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. The people that suggest that oftentimes end up in a closet. Okay. He's not going to be losing weight. All right. That's not how this works. Guys that big, stay big. He's going to play interior. He'll play D end on the goal line maybe because he's a freak athlete, but he's a big dude that needs to play inside. Don't hide what it is. He's got an NFL frame. Legitimately. He's got an NFL frame. The width of that man's shoulders is not normal. I don't know. I don't pay attention to everyone. I'm like, man, that is really wide. And that just means girth, which means more weight. He's going to be 315 conservatively. And based on his athleticism, good for him. Oregon has done as good a job of recruiting D linemen as any program in the country not named. Fill in the blank. Which one do you think I'm going to say?
Georgia.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they're right there with everybody else, though. And getting the kid that Texas wants. I don't know if you know this, but PFF had the 2 tackles at Texas last year, 1-2 in the nation.
Yep, I haven't seen that.
So that's a good sign. Okay, Texas knows what they're doing with D tackles. This is a good football player, and somebody I know Oregon's got depth, but if he didn't play by his sophomore year, I'd be surprised. I don't like freaking freshmen to play at D tackle, but as a sophomore, sure, I could see it.
Yeah, I think he's someone that I wouldn't expect to play in 2025 either, but in 2026, yeah, I think that's someone
Sure.
who's going to have an opportunity at the very least to be a part of the mix. I do wonder if the one exception to that defensive tackle rule is Aiden Breland. I mean, like
Oh,
that,
he's
like
an animal. That is
yeah,
an animal.
I think he at the defensive tackle
He's got
spot.
to play some, right? Like
I
a
would
little.
I would think so. I would think so. Now the defensive line is ridiculously deep. They have two transfers who are starters, Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon, both really good football players. But then after that, Ben Roberts transferred out after having a nice spring game, and Keonware Hudson is still in there. But then, you got to go 4, 5, or 6 deep on the interior of the defensive line, and I think Breland will have a chance to get in there. Let's also talk about Dorian Brew, because this is the name that most stood out to me amongst this flurry of recruitments that I knew who he was. I knew Oregon and had him on campus for a visit. This was the most surprising of the 4. Davison, Brame, Sharma, and Brew. This one came the most out of left field for me. He was expected to go to Ohio State. They have a bunch of other defensive backs highly rated in the 2025 class committed. What do you make of Dorian Brew?
Two things. Number one, he's lived in multiple states, but Ohio State, everybody thought that's where he was going to go. He lived in Ohio. However, they don't have the number 1 corner committed in their class. They've got the top 2 in the nation. I'm going to go out on a limb because his film is him all playing corner pretty much. He wants to go somewhere he's going to be the guy, which I don't blame him. And while he's good, he's not as good as those 2 guys. And that's my guess. And Oregon, good for them. They don't care where a kid's from anymore. Like, it just doesn't matter. They just need his address to send him stuff. That's it. And they figure out the rest. Like, their recruiting is wild. They got a kid that nobody thought, myself included. Like, I was on the Ohio State podcast the other day. Like, what's going on? I'm like, you tell me. So they don't lose DBs very often that have lived in Ohio. Okay. But at the same time, long-bodied kid. He's got some good feet. He's very physical at the line. I don't think he's a burner. And I think his best spot might be the nickel spot because he just really likes contact. But that's a player that Oregon can use in some capacity. He could probably play safety and have no problems with it. I think Oregon got a steal.
Do you think that he is most well suited to play the nickel spot, or that's just where he might end up playing? Because, his film breakdown per the 24/7 Sports Analysis put him as a boundary corner because of the way I think that he just kind of stays glued to receivers and uses the sideline as an extra defender really, really well. But is this someone that Oregon fans should look at and consider coming in essentially as an athlete, but as a defensive back, and you can put him here, you can put him there, or you can put him over there? Or is it corner preferred, but if necessary, or if the depth chart shakes out this way or that way, he could wind up playing safety or nickel?
It's a little bit difficult to say for sure because boundary corner, there's nowhere to hide. You play that spot, you're on an island.
Yep.
And like when my guy Jay for Ohio State's lined up at boundary, and he will, nobody's going to want to be that guy in front of it. They won't admit that on TV. You better be a dude because you're going to get mossed.
Yeah, the last 2 corners for Oregon that have been the boundary corners, Christian Gonzalez, 1st round, Kyrie Jackson, 4th round. Like, that's typically your number 1 corner.
Yeah, because, there's just not much way to help them because everybody runs like 3 guys to the wide side of the field. You got to put your safety help that direction. You're on an island. I don't know if Brew has the pure speed to take on the guys that run 4.4 and sub 4.4, but at the same time, he is physical and he's very technical. So he could play multiple spots, but like the competition he was playing on the film I watched, he was just murdering guys. These aren't South Florida kids. This isn't Houston competition that I was like normally think of. It was hard to grade it, but long arms, has some physical tendencies that in the run game most corners don't. But that's also what got me thinking about nickel, and that's okay because that's even a harder spot to play. Because sometimes you got to take on a tight end, and that's never good for a DB. But he's willing to do it. If you're Oregon, you figure it out when you get him on campus. That's the bottom line. So I think Oregon got a good football player. I just don't know exactly how I would use him yet.
Well, he is a 5-star defensive back. He's not the only one that Oregon is seeking to get in the 2025 class. And coming up next, we've got updates on those pursuits. Stick around. All right, Brian, let's talk updates, and then we've got some questions from the audience specifically for you because you are the most special among us, obviously. So we'll begin. Yeah, Brian just gives me all sorts of faces throughout the show for those on podcasts, and it's kind of my favorite part of our interactions. Let's start with Trey McNutt. There was a Steve Wiltfong prediction from, he's on 3, right? Yeah, on 3. For Oregon to land Trey McNutt, which, hey, don't have to twist my arm to put me in a good mood for that sort of prediction. Are you feeling the same thing?
Well, if Steve said it, there's a good chance. Like, I had already written him off to Ohio State, but I'd also written off Brew to Ohio State. So what do I know? Ohio State recently got a big-time safety. And that, again, this might just be a situation he didn't pick soon enough or something. I don't know. But, like, I'm never going to pick Oregon for a kid from Northern Ohio. It just doesn't – it never happens. It just never happens.
Well, it did just happen.
That's what's wild about it. That's why recruiting now is a little bit more fun than it used to be. Like, it used to be 25 years ago, out of the top 20 kids in Ohio, I could about tell you where they're going just based on their high school and where they're ranked.
Well, USC never used to let a big-time player get out of the city of Los Angeles. And now if, the best player in the LA area goes to USC over Oregon, Duck fans would probably be in my YouTube comments saying, what the heck's going on?
And they probably should, because USC is stinking at recruiting compared to what they should be. I don't know what that is. That's very bizarre, by the way. It's not like they lack NIL. So, yeah, you're right. But Oregon, I think it's just relationships, man. They're surprising me and everybody else. If you'd have asked Wiltfong or anybody that I know, like, his name's come up among me and a few other guys in the industry when we're talking on the sidelines at events. Nobody's ever said, hey, he's going to go to Oregon. I've not heard that one time. Good for Oregon. Like, that's, if they can get him, Steve's not putting in that prediction without intel from one of the coaches. He's not.
Yeah.
Like, he's a Midwest guy. He lives in Indianapolis. Like, he knows what's going on. That gives me pause on what's going on with some other schools, though. Like, Michigan and Ohio State got to be scratching their heads because that's right in their backyard. Like, literally. It's taking.
Well, I feel like Oregon just kind of has to feel like a thorn in their side right now. Like, wait a minute. We used to get, we only had to go up against Penn State and Iowa for the, now we got to battle Oregon. We got to battle USC, but hey, realignment is
what it is,
the way of the world. You adapt or die. So let's talk about Michael Terry III, because this is a guy, I mentioned him a little bit earlier in the show. Really good football player, really versatile football player. This is someone Oregon's been after for a while. Everything I've heard, Oregon's in a good position. Do you know what his timeline is? Because this is a guy who could play a couple different spots, and tight end is indeed one of those positions.
I heard that at one point, Oregon was looking at him as a running back, possibly. And I was like, okay. I don't know how accurate that is, but
running back, tight end.
That's what I read. I read it, and I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know about that, but whatever. I'm guessing that was either an idiotic comment or Oregon's just trying to go outside the box, but whatever. The point is still the same. He could be an edge guy. He could be an outside linebacker. He could be a running back, whatever. They'll figure it out because he just makes plays. His list of schools also tells you a lot. He's the number one athlete by either on 3 or 247 or both. And Texas wants him really bad, and A&M wants him really bad. What does that tell you? You know what I mean? Nebraska is kind of the outlier here. He took an OV there early. No offense to the Huskers. I think that's not going to happen. But then again, anything's possible in today's recruiting world. So I will say this. Oregon gets a kid on campus right now. The other schools better be fearful. I mean, they're on fire. You know what I mean? There's not a hotter school in the country in recruiting. So, and strange things are happening. I just looked at my phone. A kid just picked Arkansas over Georgia and Florida State. So, yeah.
Arkansas?
For a kid from Georgia, that was a national top 50 kid. So don't get me started. I got a lot of things to deal with that.
Wait, what player was that?
Tavion Wallace, national recruit.
He went to, I mean, good. You know what? Good for Sam. Good for Sam Pittman. Good for Sam Pittman. That'll be a headline recruit before he goes 5-7 and gets fired this year. Anyway, last name I want to ask you about today is Justin Hill, defensive line recruit that I've had my eye on for the last couple of weeks. The sort of player that I think is going to start to accumulate as Oregon fills out the rest of this 2025 class. Good looking football player, blue chip guy. 100%. How good of a chance does Oregon have here?
I hate picking against Oregon for kids from the Ohio area at this point. So, It's such a weird thing to say that out loud. I just wanted to see what that was like. This is the kid Ohio State wants. But Oregon is apparently trending towards, with him in some way, shape, or form. I still need to talk to somebody from that area to know that's true. But that's, like I said, they just got Brew. They're trending for McNutt. Like, you tell me what's going on here. Cincinnati kids don't even know where Oregon is.
The grass is damn green in Eugene, Brian. That's all there is to it. It's green, and the weather's nice this time of year.
Well,
when the weather's nice, there's no better place in the world than the state of Oregon, in my humble opinion. But your answer there and your phrasing is most fortuitous as we move into a couple of listener questions for Brian. If you ever want a question answered here on the show, YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, or if you want priority access, go join the flock over at Subtext. That's where these questions came from. Ben sent this one in. Spencer, I got a question for Brian. Several times, Brian has said he hates predicting Oregon recruits because Oregon is so random. Is that because Oregon wasn't really considered a national program until Dan? It's too far for most players. Just wondering, as Dan Lanning seems to be pretty transparent, who Oregon's recruiting targets are.
It's pretty simple. It's because they just don't have much in-state recruiting base. It doesn't matter who the head coach is. Long before Dan wasn't even in the coaching profession, they had to recruit like this. They've always tried to get Texas kids. They've always tried to get Florida kids, etc. And they've had success, but it's just so random which kids want. I was just at the Future 50 event. Top 26 recruits were down at IMG Academy. A bunch of them were looking at the Ducks, but hardly any of the kids I spoke with were from the West Coast. There were a few, but most of the kids were Midwest and East. That is random. There is no more random school than Oregon to try to project their class. It's impossible.
So it's just all about geography, really.
100%.
Gotcha. Speaking of geography, the last question I've got for you today, Brian, and this has been on the mind of at least one Oregon fan, this one, and another one, myself. When are you going to get up to Eugene and see what is so magical and wonderful about Autzen Stadium and the campus?
I was actually speaking with somebody about that the other day who's very large and likes to run over people. Would you guess who that might be?
Jordan Davison?
Unbelievable. All right, the videos that I sent this person that you're this podcast you're watching right now.
Oh, Zaire Addison.
Yeah, I know Zaire personally, and I was at his workout the other day. I might go see Zaire, but that trip is just so long from the East Coast. Like it's 5-6 hours.
Download a good movie on the plane. It goes by in the blink of an eye. And look, here's what we can promise you, Brian: a humidity-free environment. Okay, you're not going to come up here and sweat bullets. You get up here in the fall on a picturesque day, there's nothing like it that you can't find down in Florida. You just can't. It's too flat.
I'm not going to comment on that. I'll get to an Oregon game at some point, but the game that I really want to see is the Civil War. Question for you, to your knowledge, beyond like a year or two, any credibility to them at least trying to keep that as a semi-regular?
No, that's the intention. This year it's being played in Corvallis because last year was in Eugene.
Okay.
The Apple Cup has renewed its series through about 2029 or so. My understanding, and last that they kind of said on the matter, Oregon and Oregon State are going to attempt to keep this matchup alive, which I am very much in favor of, though I'm not in favor of what's happened to the Bees. I think that keeping that matchup alive is still, just for the state of Oregon, I think you got to keep playing it. Even if Oregon State is, essentially getting relegated down, the intention is to keep doing it. So we'll pencil you in for the Civil War in 2025 in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. We'll try and get you a ticket.
I'm going to be on the sideline, Ryan, coming because I'm going to sit next to you and everybody yell at me.
Oh, Brian Smith, our Lockdown Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, thanks as always.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.